Hey, boss lady, how are you juggling it all these days? I'm Christy Atwater.
And I'm Andrea Gigline. And our guest today has some answers on that front.
Yes, she's a practicing psychiatrist, a mother with 2 young children at home, and a chair of the board of an LA-based nonprofit focused on food justice and emotional health. Do you believe it, Andrea?
Let me just tell you, I know that the conversation at our house has been, boy, did we dodge a bullet not having little children at this point in time. And I know you didn't dodge the bullet.
I did not dodge that bullet. And we have probably one of the best circumstances. My husband just recently retired, and yet it still was a challenge. He became the 3rd grade homeschool teacher. My work shifted home. My company had furloughs, and it's plenty of its own challenges, as well as my department. And I felt the stress, but yet knowing that we had it way, way better than most of America.
You bet. Well, working parents definitely have had it in this pandemic. So let's meet our guest, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And Dr. Ford, do you mind if we call you Christina?
Not at all.
Thank
we
you.
got it in there. My parents will be proud.
I love it. And believe me, I do understand that. You know, all kidding aside, you wear lots of different hats. You're a mom, a psychiatrist, a community advocate. We'll break that all down in this conversation. But first, just give me a hint. How do you do it all?
I feel like that is both a short answer and a long answer. Some days are certainly easier than others. And some days I ask myself the same question. How do I do this? Yeah, it's a constant juggle and a constant, I think, reshuffling of boundaries and availability and just knowing that you can't be everywhere at the same time.
Well, and maybe a better question is, why do you do it all?
That's a good one too. Especially now, right? When we're all under such stress and strain. Really, the answer is I can't imagine not. All the facets of my life and my career that I participate in are all deeply important to me. It's exceedingly important for me to be an active mother at home with my children as much as possible, for all the good and the bad and everything in between. And it's very important for me to be there for my patients. And I was certainly raised with an ethos that you do whatever part you can to make the world a better place. And so it's very important to me to also give back in whatever ways I can.
You know, that's incredible because, you said that you were raised, and I know that from an early age you wanted to be a doctor. What influenced that?
I had, I think, very kind of outside the box, forward-thinking parents. Both of my parents really instilled in me the idea that I really could be anything I wanted to be. They had some high aspirations. I can't lie.
Sure.
And I think, especially for my mom, I don't know that she would have. She was of that generation that didn't necessarily label themselves a feminist, but they were very woman-oriented. And so for her, I think it was also very important that her daughter know that she could be anything she wanted to be, independently of other people in her life.
Okay.
Christina, I love that. Now, you started out, though, studying to become a surgeon. Can you tell me what changed your mind?
A lot of things. So I really went to medical school. I had no examples, in front of me in my family, certainly. So I really didn't know much about what it truly meant to be a physician. I had a wonderful family doctor who was my mom's physician, my pediatrician, and delivered me. And so she was definitely a hero. But I don't really I didn't really have a sense of the day-to-day. And so I went into medical school really thinking of it as just training in a specific skill. And for me, that was going to be surgery. And, you're young when you make the decision. But both to pursue a medical education and then to pick a specialty. And so much of the decision, there were moments, but more than anything, it was really an evolution. And I have to be honest and say, unfortunately, and I know that this is changing, but unfortunately, at the time that I was in training, I really didn't get the benefit of many female role models, period. There certainly were some. I don't want to say there weren't any, and they were fantastic, but also ones that seemed to be living a life that looked like one I wanted to live.
Correct.
And I really did feel, that pressure of how to fully be a mother and a practicing surgeon, just time-wise, first of all. But then also, it requires, for me personally, that role requires a certain compartmentalization that I realized I could do, but it didn't necessarily bring out the best in me, frankly.
Right. I have to say that I remembered reading a study years ago about the negative impact on medical residents on the schedule that you were put under, that the level of fatigue actually made you less effective and less healthy. And that alone, that I remembered when I heard that, it was like, well, why are we doing that to our doctors? That doesn't make sense. But it speaks to that time, like when you looked at their lives and said, wait a minute, how do I do that part? So tell me, in addition to that, what were some of the challenges? There weren't a lot of them. There weren't a lot of examples. What additional challenges did you see in the field?
Well, the issue you're speaking about, that we're finally really being forced to look at the epidemic of physician burnout. And there is much being written and spoken about that topic. But also what you point to, burnout is a very useful term, but it does place the onus on the person, as opposed to the system.
Right.
And, having been through it, there were times where you're burnt, really, is what it is. The system burns you out.
Right.
And so in terms of those models, it's very taxing on the body. Let's start with that. Your back, your neck, your hands, your joints in general. Frankly, for very long surgeries, your bladder. It's very taxing. And when you think about career longevity, because of the technical skills required, there are many surgeons that practice for a very long time, depending on what sort of surgery they do. But I was planning on plastics and reconstructive surgery, which is really fine-tuned, and so often those careers are a little shorter because you need those really fine skills. And again, kind of getting back to that role model piece, I really was lucky in that my mom especially, but I had several women that I could look up to who worked throughout their lives. They really, the idea of retirement didn't really exist. And so I was always looking at career longevity as well. And so I was really fortunate. I admittedly knew very little about psychiatry. My family was not one that focused much on feelings. So, I had majored in English in college, and so I knew about the science of psychology and psychiatry from that sense. But I really just, when we started learning about it in med school, I loved it. It spoke to that other side of my background. It was able to bring in so many different facets of life and various fields. And in medicine, it's one of the few fields where your skill set only improves with each year you age.
Yeah.
You have more experience, more wisdom, different experiences. You've made mistakes and learned from them. So that was really enticing to me.
Well, that's awesome, Christina. I love hearing how even though you were skilled and you could do the work as a surgeon, you still followed your passion, what you would be passionate about. But let's switch gears a little bit. And you followed another passion called about 6 years ago. And that was when you began working with Feast. Tell me about Feast. I don't know about that organization. I know Andrea does, but I don't. And I'm super curious.
Sure. So, so FEAST is an acronym. It stands for Food, Education, Access, and Support Together. It is definitely a mouthful, and we fill a lot of gaps. So we provide 16-week wellness programs in under-resourced communities, and we're hitting at the intersection of poverty, obesity, and diet-related illness, and doing so in a supportive community to really optimize emotional health.
Yeah.
So what that looks like is, like I said, it's a 16-week program. Pre-quarantine, people would meet for 2 hours a week in various community centers, schools, churches, wherever we can really find space. And the first hour is all nutrition and food education, cooking demonstrations, learning about the food system and how things became as polarized as they are. And when I specifically, we work in communities that have been designated, quote unquote, food deserts.
Right.
And I put the quotations there because, again, it's kind of like that term burnout in that, it's not that food doesn't exist. It's that the policies have not been in place to really support nutritious food sources in those areas. And instead, there's plenty of fast food options, but not necessarily grocery stores that provide much produce. There's a dearth of organic options. And so we want to empower people to know more about that too. And then also with that first hour of education, each participant is provided with a food box, a scholarship for organic produce, for plant-based foods, so grains, beans, legumes, and then they're given an opportunity to really learn how to cook with them. Yep. But then the second hour of that 2-hour session is, to some extent, the more meaty part, which is really a community support circle. Right. And that's where participants can bring all the stuff to the fore that's about food, but that doesn't actually concern what you put in your mouth. So it gives people an opportunity to talk about why they make certain choices, to talk about their financial stresses, their relationship stresses, their work issues, and to really do that in a place where they're uplifted and held.
Well, and I've got to imagine that your training as a psychiatrist, that was a real interest. Like, what is the psyche behind this community? And
100%.
Yeah, but also knowing that you're a sole practitioner, the leadership role of taking on as the board, what additional leadership skills, like what additional things did you have to bring to the forefront? Because in psychiatry, it's more you're listening and doing an analysis against data. And in community advocacy and leading a board, what's the other skills you're bringing out?
Sure. So the one thing in particular that is an easy translator is that, in my one-on-one work with patients, so much of it is about behavior change and about learning how to be a much more active participant. And I really work from a place of self-empowerment in my one-on-one work, and that absolutely translates over. I have to give credit to the founder of the organization, Sam Polk, who saw something in me and elected me for the position. And but once in it, the skills that I think that I bring to the fore really are collaboration, communication, being able to see the potential leadership qualities in other people that they may not see in themselves.
Right.
It's been really important to me to gather a good team around me, certainly, but also around the organization, and to really allow everyone to feel like their voice has merit and to help them bring it to the fore. And it's wonderful that, I want to toot our horn too, that we have an entirely female-led organization.
That's awesome.
Which is wonderful in its own right, and it's a diverse organization. So I'm really, really proud to work with them and support what we do.
Yeah, and as we've spoken to our tribe here on Hey Boss Lady, I have mentioned from time to time my daughter Dana Reiser's participation. Yes, you always have to.
Can I toot her horn as well?
Yes, please. Well, I can't because that would be too ridiculous. But go ahead. I'd love to.
I consider myself so fortunate to work alongside Dana. She is our executive director, and she's a wonderful teammate. And we collaborate very closely and really allow ourselves space to be who we are as leaders too.
Yeah, and the question I was going to ask you about, and I think that leads right into that with that collaboration, because you gave us such a beautiful description of the true meaning of how Feast works and your interaction with it and your interest. But then there was 2020.
Yeah.
Can you tell us how you, Dana, the board, how that transitioned and what it looks like?
Sure. Certainly, I think like any nonprofit, in existence, we all kind of collectively took a big, deep breath and thought, how are we going to do this?
Right.
But really, it started with going straight to our participants, going straight to our community. One of our leaders is a woman named Anna. She's our community manager. She was a participant in one of our first groups ever, and she now works as our community manager. And so she went to the people, really, and asked, what do you need? And that was both current participants and former graduates. And so 95% of the people said they were just worried about getting food on their table. Many people who we serve work in the food industry, and so many were they woke up one day and they no longer had a job. And these are people who are under tremendous financial strain as it is. And so we pivoted, I think, really beautifully. We moved from a solely in-person setup to completely online. Mm-hmm. And that was really worrisome for us because so much of what we do is really person to person. And so the virtual seemed really daunting. But it actually allowed us to expand our community. So we were no longer constrained by geography.
Right.
So our groups could be more spread out. We actually were able to build a larger community. And then specifically on the ground, what we did is we knew we have to get food to people. So we reached out to all of our partners, every farmer's market, grocery store, and what we've done is we've arranged for weekly drop-off delivery. It's completely, safe and masked and no actual person-to-person contact. Mm-hmm. And we have volunteers come down once a week. We fill boxes and we take them out to all our participants, all of our graduates, anyone who reaches out for help, we are helping them. And then in each of those boxes, we basically have transitioned to wellness program in a box. And so
Perfect.
In the box each week is the recipe and the classes, and then people can join virtually if they have the opportunity. I mean, frankly, many of our participants don't even have consistent Wi-Fi.
Right.
So there are many barriers, and we are continually adapting. But really, it looked like going virtual and taking the food to the people.
Well, and Christina, I really want to know, that sounds amazing. What are the metrics around that? Like, are you finding that you're making a difference? What,
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us more about that.
So let me start with the psychiatry hat.
Yes.
Again, behavior change is what's really important to me, and a sense of self-advocacy. So one of the things that we measure is self-esteem. And across the board, when the majority of people joining our program have really low self-esteem and a poor sense of health literacy. And by the end of the program, that has completely shifted, where people are in the moderately high to high self-esteem range and really feel like they can be an active advocate in their own health. So that's super important to me.
For sure.
And we measure that on something called the Rosenberg scale. And then some of the other metrics would be, I mean, certainly we see weight loss, but we are not a weight loss program. And not everyone who comes in needs to lose weight for their health, right? So, but we do see weight loss. We see inches dropped. We see blood pressure problems subside. We see blood sugar issues either stabilize, or we find that people can be on less medications. Their primary care physicians are all, by the end of the program, very pleased with the results in terms of those metrics. And then certainly we have, we also assess consumption of fruits and vegetables, and oftentimes it's pretty low in the beginning, or really limited to maybe one or two things.
Right.
And by the end, people, again, have much increased literacy in options and are eating and consuming much more and drinking less sodas, for example.
Yeah.
So there are several things that we measure, and those are some of the highlights.
Well, that's one of the things that just hearing you describe something that I know there's always been this argument that when you take care of people and you provide better alternatives, it actually impacts a lot of different things. And what I, clearly heard you say is that once you started educating and caring for the individual and providing better alternatives, in fact, other metrics that have an impact on the society level, not just on that family's level, the cost of medical care in a community, all of that begins to go down. And, that's a beautiful when you think about how it's taking care of others. But I'm wondering, how has your work changed you?
I think, if I look back at Christina, let's say, entering med school, and Christina now, some family members might disagree with this on certain days, but I think I'm a much more patient version of myself. I feel I'm much more self-aware. I'm a less reactive person. I feel like I better understand why I may feel a certain way about certain interactions and events. And I was saying before, I definitely did not grow up in a family where feelings were emphasized, or even that was almost a 4-letter word in my family. And, so much of that is generational. I mean, my father was born during the Depression. My grandmother was an immigrant. The story, right? There's just no time.
You betcha.
It's all about survival, right? So, I definitely feel as though the process and processes that I've gone through in my training and my work have really allowed me to shift that within my own family. And so in terms of, that generational sway, I think I'm a very different sort of parent than I might have been.
Well, that's awesome, Christina, because I want to ask, we at Hey Boss Lady usually ask, what is our biggest hope for the future? But since you have children, I want to know, what's your biggest hope for your children in the future?
I have so many hopes. At the core, I really want them to feel fulfilled. I want them to feel like they can fully be themselves, whoever that person turns out to be. I hope that they feel that they really have few limitations in life, or that they understand that obstacles exist and can figure out, they have the strategies to move through them. Because life's not easy, right? I mean, here we are at home,
Yes.
Zoom schooling, all
Yes.
of that. So, but to be able to face challenges and come out the other side feeling successful.
And do you feel hopeful that the groundwork that the pandemic, erupted is laying the groundwork for that possibility, for those hopes?
I think I do. I mean, short answer is that I am admittedly an optimist at heart, and
Great.
I do remain hopeful. With everything that we've gone through, not just in 2020, but the past 4 years, and there's just been so many movements that have started, and so much has been laid bare. So much is really just on the table, and we have to really look at as a society. And that's daunting, but it's also exciting.
Right.
And so I am really hopeful that the future is really bright.
Great.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for being with us today.
Sure, thank you.
Dr. Christina Ford is a private practice psychiatrist in Los Angeles and board chair of Feast, a nonprofit community service organization in Los Angeles. I'm Christy Atwater.
And I'm Andrea Gigline, and this is Hey Boss Lady. Remember to follow us on our Facebook page, Hey Boss Lady, because just like Feast is a community that builds, and Christina does the work of building family communities through the individual, Hey Boss Lady wants to be your community.